My goal wasn't to be just a professional footballer. I actually want to have a long-term career as a professional footballer. Is a very big difference. Even just the specificity of your professional footballer, your 1-year contract, you don't do anything, you still achieved your goal. But I was like, not only do I want to have a long-term career, I want to leave professional football on my terms and injury-free.
Welcome back to Dive Beyond Sport, the podcast where performance meets humanity. And today's guest is Paul McVeigh. Paul, thank you so much for joining us, man.
Pleasure, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, Paul. I think it's fitting that we're speaking to you whilst the World Cup is going on in the USA. We've both represented our country, myself and Freddie. I've never represented Jamaica in Kingston. Freddie's never represented Great Britain at home in Sheffield. And, I wanted to paint a picture of you at 21 years old, on the bench, getting the shout from your manager to go and warm up for the first time, and being taught through the tactics on the sideline, then running onto the pitch as a substitute at Windsor Park for your senior debut with the number 17 on your back. Hungry, I imagine, to make an impact and score a goal, only to have a 90th minute equaliser nicked off your toe by the Canadian defender.
Yeah,
Tell us what you... Thank you very much. Tell us what you thought, felt and saw during that experience.
Yeah, very good. It's taking me back now. That's nearly 30 years ago. Interesting. So I haven't thought about that for a long, long time, because actually my international career was such a small part of the overall nearly 20 years in professional sport. And what I mean by that is you only spend like maybe 3 days with the international team, and because I only represented my country 20 times for the senior team, it was just such a small part of the overall picture. But yeah, it was pretty amazing. And don't worry whether it went in off the Canadian defender or not, I ran away celebrating that goal and everyone was cheering and coming around me, because we obviously were 1-0 down and we managed to nick a draw in the last minute, which is the best feeling.
I love that, Paul. And I would also I think I don't want to make this podcast too political. There's a lot to talk about with you. I really want to dive into a lot of the business stuff, because I'm super interested in that. Mm-hmm. But I do want to paint a picture of your sporting background, where that started. Obviously, growing up in Northern Ireland during the Troubles and all that stuff, I can imagine that sport must have been something very important and a sort of powerful influence for you at that stage. Could you just kind of paint a picture of, when you got drawn into football and what it was like in those sort of early days in Belfast?
Yeah. Well, I suppose probably one of the best examples I can give you is actually after the 16 years of me growing up in Belfast, and as you say, during the Troubles of the 70s and 80s and 90s, and when I'd actually left to go and join Tottenham Hotspur as a 16-year-old kid in the summer of 94, it was actually the same year, same day actually, same first day when Jurgen Klinsmann signed at Tottenham Hotspur. So both Jurgen and I had our first days at Spurs, and he got slightly more attention than I did. I don't know why, but he was obviously a World Cup winner and complete football and superstar, but also drove into White Hart Lane and parked his Volkswagen Beetle next to Alan Shearer's Rolls Royce, which probably gave you an idea of both of their egos at the time. And it was actually the first summer back after that, and when I was home in the summer of 95, there was a real civil unrest in Belfast, and don't need to go into the details of why that was the case, but there was lots of, and you've seen it in London, happened lots of time all around the world. There was lots of bonfires and civil unrest. People were smashing windows of shops. Buses were getting stopped as they were driving down the street, and driver getting pulled out and passengers off, and the buses were getting burnt and everything. So it was a real kind of crazy time happening. And actually, at one time, there was I don't even know how you call it, a shootout. Is that the right word? Basically, at this end, you had this kind of crowd, which looked like a crowd of yobs, but were basically my mates, all standing at the top with scarves around their face. holding milk bottles with a rag in it with petrol in it, and that's how you make a petrol bomb, just FYI. I'm sure you get on YouTube anyway. And at the other end, about 200, 300 yards away down the hill outside the police, in England you'd call it a police station. In Belfast you call it the barracks, because it was like an army barracks, because it was the British Army. And the army, the British soldiers were standing there with their 3 Saracens, and essentially they were just shooting the rubber bullets up into the crowd. Now, I don't know if you've seen a rubber bullet's about that 7 or 8 inches long, about 3 or 4 inches wide, looks about a big candle, and they're just shooting them out of this thing, and they're just supposed to bounce off the street, bounce and hit the crowd. And as the crowd would run up, and obviously people were trying to throw petrol bombs, and this was getting hit, so people were literally getting dragged away because they'd been injured, and all sorts of crazy stuff happening. And at one stage there was this kind of like, without going into too much detail, there's almost like a to and fro, and like a sea, the way a sea ebbs and flows in and out, and that's the way a crowd and the sort of the British soldiers were going up and back, till eventually the British soldiers in their Saracens were driving up the street, then like a shark going into a school of fish, and all the fish would disappear and disperse. And as the Jeep drove up the street, everybody'd run off into other streets and then hiding under different things. And it just kept happening. It was like a bit of fun, cat and mouse. Until at one stage, after about 45 minutes of this, not only did the Jeep come up this side, but obviously because they were the army, they had a strategy, they also sent 2 around the back, so they got us from the other end of the street as well. So they kind of had us in this pincher movement, which meant everybody had to get off into side streets, and I'm standing there just looking, observing, staying quite back. And of course, when they came from both sides, I am running and I'm sprinting. And as I'm running, I'm thinking, what's my manager, Ozzy Ardiles, the Argentinian World Cup winner, going to think of me getting arrested by the British Army because he's in the middle of a riot? And so I ended up having to sprint under, because the soldiers jumped out of the Jeep. Everybody's getting picked up. I'm in this some person's house, jumped underneath their black taxi, hiding underneath the taxi, absolutely terrified. I could see a guy, because I'm down under a car, I can see a guy next to me in the long grass, about 3 foot of long grass, and the soldiers went in and literally grabbed him out, pulled him out, started knocking 6 lumps of shades out of him, got him into the van, pulled him away, and I'm lying under the car going, that could have been me. What are you doing? Get yourself home. So that is just a little bit of an example of what life was like growing up in Belfast.
I mean, I can't imagine seeing anything like that, and I'm very lucky to have never really experienced traumatic incidents such as that, and it happens all over the world. I think I'm very grateful for my little sporting bubble that kept me away from those kind of things. Where I grew up in Leeds and Chapeltown, it was an area that had a bad reputation for violence and things like that. But I never really saw anything at that level. But, sport was the reason that I stayed away from it even more, because I knew what I wanted to achieve in my sport. So for you, how important was football at that time, even before you moved to Spurs, when you were growing up in Belfast, to I guess, keep you away from that? How important was football for you to succeed in football, to create a good trajectory in your life?
Well, I think that because you can almost have a life growing up in Belfast and in Ireland that was very apolitical, and my family were very apolitical. So because we were, very, very religious, and, we'd go to mass every week, and, mum and dad would never let us do anything, bad, immoral, don't steal, don't hurt anybody. So just a general good moral compass growing up anyway. So I probably didn't have to have anything to do with sport that would keep me on a sort of a potential good path, but it was almost like a good excuse that if anyone ever tried to encourage me to, some of my friends were drinking or taking things they probably shouldn't have done in their early teens, and I was already, because I was going across the Spurs as an 11-year-old kid, I was kind of almost like, there's Paul the footballer. So almost like, because they were trying to protect me, trying to look after me, like, he's not drinking, so anyone who would potentially offer me something, one of the other boys would be like, no, he's a footballer, he's not drinking. So you had that, togetherness and kind of looking after each other as well, which was a great starting point. But yeah, it's also part of the reason why, and you said, Freddie, but you don't want to get too political, it's also the reason why half my family emigrated, because just growing up in Belfast in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, etc., there was just a simply it was just blatant discrimination. You know, if I come out of a Catholic area, my name's Paul McVeigh, and my cousin might have been, you know, whatever, Patrick McVeigh or anything, that just you'd go in for a job and straight away, because you knew you were Catholic, they'd be like, you're not getting a job. See you later. No matter what education you had, it's just right, see you later. And so that's why like 50% of my family emigrated to the US in the 70s, because they'd all come out of grammar schools with educations that should have got a decent job, and they're working in like biscuit factories. And they're like, well, what's the point doing this? So they all left Belfast, headed to the US, and then had, you know, incredible lives over there. But that was just part of what happened growing up in Belfast. So actually, for me, the football and the kind of the family lifestyle was already kind of put me on this path of, you know, I want to do something with my life, as opposed to I need to get away from this.
Sure. Wow. I mean, yeah, we interviewed Hannah Scott, who she won a gold medal in Paris in the women's quad sculls rowing.
Yeah.
And so she's from Coleraine.
Yeah. And how old is Hannah, roughly? Do you know?
She's young. She's
early 20s?
Early 20s.
Yeah. And it's perfect, because someone like Hannah wouldn't have had the experience of what it's like to grow up with those kind of... Now, she might have family members. She will definitely have family members who will have had, you know, different trauma and different things and experiences from it. But that's the best thing for me. That actually, I left Belfast in 94, which was pretty much around the time of the ceasefire, which led to the Friday Agreement, which led to, you know, a completely different trajectory for Belfast. Now, if you went back to Belfast today, incredible cities like Dublin, you'd go there, there's like, you know, stag do's and hen parties, there's tourists galore, because they recorded Game of Thrones in the north coast of Ireland. Millions of people come in every year from around the world just to see the Dark Ages up on. You've got the Titanic attraction, which is one of the best tourist attractions in the world. You've got, because of the peace process, you've got all of the US kind of, you know, distant first, second, third generation Irish relations who would only come back to the south, that now come to Belfast because it's safe and they can go and do it. And plus lots of people who just have never been there. And why would you? It's like, you know, I think I mentioned to you that my dad's from Jamaica. Sorry, my father-in-law's from Jamaica. You know, and whenever people like were coming over on the Windrush and stuff, and people, whether they're coming from India, wherever you're coming to migrate to the UK, you had a choice of England, Ireland, Scotland, and Wales. And you're like, well, probably going to England, Scotland, or Wales, because if I go to Northern Ireland, who knows what could happen over there? So let's just stick to the mainland. So you can kind of understand why pretty much when I was growing up, it was literally just white people, because no one else really wanted to come because it was just too dangerous.
You know, my stepsister, she went actually a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
And she said she had a wonderful time. It was amazing, but she was still quite shocked at the wall. And
oh yeah,
yeah,
things that just be like the Berlin Wall and stuff like that.
Yeah, and you know, and it's something that we're just not yet, even though it's very close to our, you know, our history and our story. It's something that you're actually quite oblivious to, really, which is quite sort of shocking. But I mean, so how old were you when you first started going to Spurs and when you started living in England?
I was 11 when I first went across. So it was actually, you probably won't remember this, but it was the 1990 World Cup where Paul Gascoigne became the absolute global superstar. You know, he was the man that after that World Cup just was either the best player in the world or the most famous footballer in the world. And I went across then that summer, and I actually ended up doing an advert with Paul Gascoigne on White Hart Lane, which is another story. But from then I'd go back every summer and school holidays for the next 5 years until at 16 and finished my GCSEs. And then went and joined, obviously on the same day as Jurgen in July '94.
And what was that like in '94 then? Like joining that team, and what was the state of the dressing room in those days?
So it's very, very different in terms of if you're a young person, I'm going to say young person, say early 20s, but like we talked about Hannah and her age, and you look at football today and you see both the fame, the reach, the wages, the probably the scrutiny, how much they see of that person. it was just very, very different. Like, it was still, those players were still, you know, like David Beckham would have made his debut in '94, and by '95 he was already, you know, one of the most famous men in England. So it was still high profile. It just wasn't in every single area of your life. And I think because, especially growing up as a kid, you'd just see, you know, on TV, you'd see the Liverpools and the Man Uniteds playing. And then you've gone from seeing it on TV, watching the FA Cup final, to then standing next to, for me, it was like Gary Mabbott was our captain when I first went to Tottenham Hotspur, and he just lifted the FA Cup 3 years earlier. And he played in the team with Paul Gascoigne and Gary Lineker, and, you know, and Alan Sugar was their boss, and, you know, Terry Venables was their coach at the time. And it was just full of personalities and just incredible players. And I think this is, you know, probably going back into your worlds and our all of our backgrounds. It was the fact that, you know, I joke about Jurgen turning up, but like, he'd already won the World Cup, so he was already at the very, very top of his game, you know, just the best of the best. Not only was he a World Cup winner, when he came to the Premier League that year, he was the best striker in the league. So, and I was watching him every day. And of course, all the young players went and watched him every day, because the coaches then watch Jurgen Klinsmann, the kind of he is, learn what he's doing. And then our manager was an Argentinian World Cup winner called Jose Ardínez, because he'd won the World Cup, you know, 16 years earlier with Argentina. And you were just surrounded by just incredible players. And again, very fortunate then for a few years later, sort of jumping ahead, when I turned pro, my first year pro, and I managed to make my debut up front with Teddy Sheringham when we were playing away at Villa Park at Aston Villa. And even on the day, you know, Gareth Southgate, you know, was kicking the shit out of me because he was playing centre half, and Wright York was playing up front for them. You know, so it was just a constant wow, this is just incredible, because these players, and even our defence, we had one of the best defenders ever in the Premier League, Sol Campbell, who went on to being invincible with Arsenal. And so the only thing you can say was just, it was incredibly exciting, not only for me going in every day to try and, you know, compete with that or be around that level. That was an amazing part. But also just in London, in England, in the 90s, you had kind of the Cool Britannia that had Tony Blair taking over with Labour. You had Oasis and Blur. You had David Beckham and Posh. You just had all of this against a backdrop of, and you guys really know the kind of the hard yards here. This is all happening on the top, and every day you're just getting punished. Your body's in pain every day because you're pushing yourself mentally and physically to try and keep up with the best performers in the world. And I just wasn't equipped for that.
Well, I mean, I love the name dropping. That it's unbelievable. And a lot of the people obviously were legends, as you said, coming into Spurs. For example, Klinsmann was already a World Cup winner, Jose Ardínez. But, you know, you're also alongside a number of people who hadn't quite made their name yet and went on to be legends. But you...
Young pro at that stage, you know, it took him another 10 years before he became an invincible at Arsenal with Henry and Petit and Vieira and all those guys. So, exactly. But still an incredible player, but just wasn't at that very highest level yet.
Yeah, I imagine you see traits of someone that could be unbelievable. And I imagine you went in there with a bunch of dreams and goals and, you know, an ambition or vision of where your future career as a Spurs legend could end up. But as you said, you weren't quite equipped for that. It didn't quite work out in the way that you might have hoped for. You made a handful of appearances for Spurs. Obviously, you went on to have a successful career with Norwich City. But in terms of the end of your time at Spurs to kind of rediscovering yourself maybe at Norwich or finding your place at Norwich, what was that process like for you behind the scenes?
Soul searching is probably the only way to describe it, because I don't know how many number of times that I just wanted to give up and just be like, I just can't do this. This is not for me. You know, it's so easy looking back and going, wow, you know, like even your intro, you know, you did this and you played this and you did this and have these things, looking back and going, oh, that was quite easy. Why doesn't everybody do that? And you're like going, because it was just the most difficult thing in the world. to do. You know, and like, you know, being Olympians, most difficult thing in the world to do. Playing the Premier League, was summiting Everest, most difficult thing. All of these things are just so incredibly hard that if you ever manage to achieve whatever you've set out to do at that kind of level of achievement, you end up in this 0.00001% of people who wanted to do this and never actually managed to. And for whatever reason, you did, I did. And I think it's just really hard to describe it because so I'm only 5'6", so I was always the smallest player in the team. So even in the first 2 years in the youth team, my athleticism was way behind everybody else's. And also I think there was, just as a bit of an FYI, I think I had a real inefficiency in my breathing. And I think it was only whenever I went and saw an ENT specialist, and she's like, well, I think your septum in your nose is slightly off, which means you're not breathing as efficiently as you could. And if you clean these pulse. So anyway, whatever she did in that quick operation of the summer for me turning 18, first year pro, I went from like the bottom 3 in the running to the top 3. And that transition in that summer was incredible for me. So it allowed me to suddenly feel like, oh, I can compete. And I know I've got some sort of skill level, but the athleticism, you can be as good a player as you want. Unless you can run for 90 minutes and keep up, then you're not even going to get a touch of the ball. So doing that was the first part. But then it's all the downside. It's all the rejection. You're not playing. You're never getting a chance. Then you start going out. Then you start, you know, doing things you shouldn't do. And again, as much as I said about how, you know, really, really great start of my family and the moral compass and grounding. But then you're a young man in London and you're trying to still enjoy yourself whilst having a professional career. And then, of course, it didn't work out. So I moved on to Norwich City because it simply just wasn't good enough to sustain that level of playing against, you know, we had once Teddy, actually, the summer that I made my debut with Teddy Sharon up front, Teddy actually got sold to Man United. So then he I think won the league the next year and then won the treble the next year with Man United in that treble team of 99. But we brought in Les Ferdinand and David Ginola. And I'm like, what chance do you have? You're literally gone from, you know, one of the best players in England as a striker is keeping you out of the team. And then you sign Les Ferdinand, one of the greatest Premier League strikers, and David Ginola, one of the best players ever to grace the Premier League. So I just realized it just wasn't for me, and I moved on to Norwich City. But that was where I suddenly felt, this is my level. I feel like I can compete. I feel like there's an opportunity here. But even that took me nearly 2 years of trying to fully establish myself in the team. And that's really old because I probably was maybe 22, nearly 23 before I started playing week in, week out. And then that summer of 2001, I got into the team, started the season, and played 40 games that season, scored 10 goals. We got to the playoff final. We lost on a penalty kick to get into the Premier League, and I kind of felt like, this is it. I've got to the level I need to. And then next summer, I was top scorer. Summer after that, we ran away with the league. Summer after that, you're in the Premier League. And then you're just on this kind of, you know, you're on the path and you just know what you're doing, and then you're off and running for the next 15 years.
Wow. And if you had to, this is probably very difficult, but if you had to name the thing that kept you going, because that's a long time.
Yeah.
I mean, 22 sounds young, but that's a long time to be.
Years of pretty much nothingness, 6 years, no repay on all the hard work. Like, you used to have a 4-year window. That was almost like a 6-year cycle for me of just going, you got a little bit for 3 games at Spurs, but.
And I think there's also no guarantee of an end point to that period as well. Like, our 4-year cycle has a clear end point, whereas that could just be ongoing, like, you don't know.
And most don't get anything. Most come to, I've got a 1-year contract as a pro, and then you get nothing, and then you leave. Or I've got a 3-year contract and you don't make an appearance, then you leave. So absolutely no guarantee. And I think that's just why everything I've always done has always just been so performance related, that it is just simply down to, are you doing what's being asked of you? And so if to answer your question, Freddie, probably the one thing that really kept me going was my mindset. And I don't know whether that was because I read a book at 17 and probably didn't really believe in myself that I was capable of doing this, and then read this book by a guy called Tony Robbins, who's like a kind of US sort of self-development guru, and read this book and just completely changed what I thought was possible in life. And so as soon as I read that book, I suddenly went on this path of, oh, here's the target I'm set myself, here's my goal, here's what I'd like to achieve. And then, just without sort of stealing Tony's IP, but essentially what he says is, if you want massive results, and my massive results was playing in the Premier League, being a top player in the team, you had to take massive action. And I wanted massive results, and I probably took mediocre action. And so I'm like, if I kept kept coming back to that, I want this, but I'm not prepared to do what it takes to get this. And then at one stage I got to 21, and I was just thinking, the career's not going where it needs to go. I'm not playing in the team every week. If I don't change something drastic, I'm going to be going back on the boat, back to Ireland with my tail between my legs, and this is, complete waste of time. And so I changed to asking myself this one question, which was, what I'm about to do, is this going to help me get in the team? And if the answer was no, I didn't do it. And if the answer was yes, I did it.
And did that count for on the pitch and away from football as well?
Everything. Mostly away. It was on the pitch, you're training, you're pushing, and you're doing what you can. But away, it was like, I would go to McDonald's at whatever time. Is this going to help me? No, it's not. No more McDonald's. I used to go out drinking. Is this going to help me? No, it's not. No more drinking. So I gave up drinking for 2 years when I was 21. Is this, whatever it was, whatever it happened to be, going for a night out, doing whatever it was, is this going to help me? No, done. And then it became so clear that this is acceptable and this is unacceptable. And now I have the parameters, almost like the guardrails of what allows me to try it again with no guarantee. Is this going to help me get in the first team? And then eventually it did.
And so then the book by Tony Robbins.
Yeah.
Is that what inspired you to get into psychology?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I'm right in saying that you studied a degree in performance psychology?
I did sports science when I was playing, and then I did my master's in psychology after I finished.
After you finished, okay, got it. So you did your
sports science.
So sports science whilst you were playing professionally.
Yeah.
I mean, that can't be a common combination.
There was a few people, I actually saw the guy recently, a guy called Colin Murdoch, who started Man United, who got his law degree when he was playing. There was definitely a few other people who got degrees and doing different things and studying things. And obviously the PFA, Professional Football Association, were always saying, try and do different courses. I actually started a business degree when I was 21 before getting into the first team, actually just as it was breaking in properly. And it was like 3 or 4 days at the college plus some extra. And I just thought, I can't do it now because it's taken away from me trying to get in the team. So it's back to that. Is this going to help me get in the team? No, it's not. I can do my degree later. So it's only when I got in, into the groove of playing week in, week out, then I thought I got the capacity to do a degree on top of playing.
I think I really like that, the way that you framed that about, will it help me, will it not help me? And then obviously adding the sports psychology aspect in on top of that. I went through a very similar change of thought and perspective. Mine was more based around regret and wanting to avoid the feeling of regret. And every decision that I made had to be one that would benefit me, so that when I looked back and considered the decisions, I couldn't regret it, even if it didn't work out to be the right thing. And I similarly had a real keen interest in psychology. But I do still think in many aspects, and in some sports, it's very underused and underrated. I think in diving, it's used a lot better now. I think there's real good structures in place. But in the football world, I feel like there's still many gaps in terms of the use of performance psychology. Would you feel the same way?
Yeah, definitely. I could give you a chapter and verse on that answer. But interesting to talk about the regrets, and one of the things that I also chose, which was again was a conscious choice, that when I stopped drinking for those few years and I got myself playing every week, I then consciously chose to start drinking again, because I thought I would regret it if I went through my entire career and I might have got back playing the Premier League regularly, I might have earned more money and I might have had a better career, but my decision at the time, based on what I thought was right or wrong, was that I'm going to drink now so that I can go and have nights out, have enjoyable times enjoy myself in, in my understanding of the word better if I was drinking than if I wasn't, which probably took away from my level of professionalism, took away from my ability to hit the real heights or maximize my potential. But I was really comfortable for that, so it wasn't a regret that I chose. That I'm not going to regret having an entire career and not having those kind of nights out, which I really enjoyed, whether it's in the Irish DNA that I have, where we just like love, sitting around a table and having a drink with your friends, or maybe it was just because, I don't know, whatever other reason why, but I thought, no, I'm going to go back. And as soon as I went back, and I was very comfortable having that balance. So again, for me, it wasn't about, I wasn't Paul, just the footballer. I was Paul who wanted to maximize his experiences on this planet.
And I think that's kind of right. First of all, it's the control of the decision is very important. But also like the understanding of balance, and sometimes you need to like kind of overshoot to then find the right level. And with drinking, for example, for myself, I went through a period of not drinking, and then I started drinking again, and now I still don't, because I don't find any real joy and value in doing it. But I don't feel regret over missing nights out or missing social events and things like that. So for me, it's still the right decision. Whereas for you, that's something that you found value in, and that's okay. And as long as you're comfortable with the level that you're at and what you're getting out of it, that's really, really important to make sure that you have that good balance.
And interesting, I've now stopped again for the last 3 years just because I've got small children. So I've now, obviously, that we're building the Speakify platform. So with me being turning 50 next year, I want to be in the best shape of my life. I want to be, not present is not the phrase, because I'm not trying to get all kind of spiritual on it. It's more the fact that I just know that every morning my children are going to be getting up early. And if I was still drinking and still had all the traits and sort of the consequences of drinking on nights out, I just simply would enjoy being with my kids. Whereas every morning, within a minute of me waking up, as soon as I see my son or my daughter, I'm fully, this is great. I just love them and love spending time with them. No matter what day of the week it is, and no matter what time of the day it is, because I've got no issue of getting up at 5, 6:30, 7, because it doesn't make any difference because I'm not drinking.
Yeah, that's so beautiful, and that's an amazing thing to have, and it must be great for them as well to feel that presence and that connection.
And they don't know any different, do they? They don't know where. I remember going in to see my dad, and hoping not listening to this. Because I remember going in one time, probably near Christmas, and probably asking him something about Santa Claus and presents and all this kind of stuff. And probably, I don't know if he was, but probably he was a bit hungover. And he's like, Paul, there's no such thing as Santa Claus. Your presents are up there. Get out. So
really burst the bubble.
Like, yeah. And so that's just like, oh, wow, okay. Lots of things. Didn't realize there, but it was probably because he was hungover and he didn't want me, sitting around in his bedroom at whatever time of the morning. So, but this is all things that just doesn't happen now because they've never seen me drunk.
That's hilarious. I mean, so you mentioned Speakify, and I kind of want to jump forward to I guess the end of your sporting career and moving into the speaking world as you did, and you've had some great success as a keynote speaker presenting for different companies, Microsoft, Barclays, Cisco, Volvo, to name a few, pretty remarkable levels. How did you discover the parallels between the corporate world and the sporting world, and then progress from your retirement to really wanting to jump into that world? What was that whole process like for you?
Yeah, well, I actually had no idea about anything to do with A, public speaking, B, anything about the corporate world, because I'd never spoken in public through my entire playing career. Excuse me. And whenever I stopped playing, I just had this one thread of mindset and psychology that ran through pretty much my life from 17 to when I finished in my early 30s. And it was only because someone said to me, they were like, oh, you should try keynote speaking. And I was like, I don't know what that is. And it's like, well, you just kind of stand up in front of a corporate audience for 45 minutes. And I was like, I could not think of anything worse. That is my literal idea of the worst possible scenario. Stand up in front of people and speak. I couldn't lead a silent prayer in front of a group of people. It was like, it's just impossible for me to do 45 minutes as a keynote. And then the guy went, but my friend does it, American guy, he charges $10,000 an hour. And I was like, what? I says, tell me a bit more about this. Anyway,
I'm listening.
yeah, I'm
Yeah.
listening. Exactly. So I was like, okay, right. So anyway, long story short, met the guy, saw him speak. He was incredible. He told me he had a speaking course in America. I went on it. This is where it gets really interesting in life. 15, 16 years earlier, I had an inferiority complex, read a book by Tony Robbins, completely changed my world, took the blinkers off what I thought was possible, had a sport and career for nearly 20 years, went on this speaking course in Tampa, Florida, and who was my roommate for the 2 weeks whilst I was on the speaking course out of a 1 year program and the 2 year residential was Tony Robbins' son, Jarek Robbins, who was already charging 7,000 for his keynote at that time. Incredible speaker, incredible guy. As you can imagine, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And he looks like Tony, 6'4" and all the rest of it. Ironically, my second book just came out a couple of months ago and Jarek's just written the foreword for it. So just an amazing introduction into the world of speaking. I came back from that course. Still, I'd never spoken, terrible at speaking, but learned the framework, learned what I had to do. And then it just goes back to what we do best, is that, okay, I wasn't born as a professional footballer. And once you understand there's kind of 4 levels of mastery of a skill, from the kind of the unconscious incompetence through to the unconscious competence. And I thought, well, I've done it for football. I'm at the unconscious incompetence, or probably the conscious incompetence, the second stage of, I'm terrible at speaking, but I can learn it. And it's just the feedback loop, and just put in effort and do the reps and keep getting better and analyze myself and see who are the best and learn from them and just keep doing it that way, like I did in football and all the way through. And then you go on a journey, and probably within 9, 12 months, I'm like, oh, right, well, I'm kind of getting the same response, and people are starting to, laugh at the right places, and they're booking me at different companies, and actually, this is getting interesting. I think I need to put my fees up, and then you get a master's in psychology, and you're like, oh, I need to put my fees up again, and then you start speaking around the world, and then, you're just trying to get onto this path of understanding how this industry works, and then 20 years later, we're now building a platform so any speaker in the world can get booked by any client, because there are just so many barriers to entry, in my opinion, in the speaking industry, that we want to change that through Speakify.
Well, I mean, tell us a little bit more about Speakify then, since that seems like a good transition.
Yeah, so it's essentially been my experience of getting into the speaker industry was really difficult. So when I came back from that course in America, I kind of thought, right, well, I'm a speaker. I've written out my speech. I've never actually delivered it yet, but I've written out my speech and know what I want to do. I've rebranded on LinkedIn. I'm not a keynote speaker, not a footballer anymore. So I started going to all these bureaus around the UK and saying, there's my background in sports, and I'd love to come and be on your roster so you can book me in your bureau. And they were like, have you got a demo reel or a show reel? And I was like, no. And like, who have you spoken for? I was like, no one. And like, what are you thinking of charging? I was like, I'm definitely not charging 10,000. I was like, maybe 1,000, maybe 2,000. It's only 45 minutes, still amazing fee. And they're like, no, not for us. Don't let the door hit you in the back on the way out. And I was like, wow. So how do I get booked? What happens if I can't get any speaking gigs? I'm not going to get booked. I'm not going to get on bureau. I'm not going to get any more bookings. And ultimately, that was the challenge, that I then had to try and find bookings myself. So I found that actually this is really difficult, a really difficult industry to get into. So it's unless you know someone or you've done something incredible, like competed in the Olympics or like played in the Premier League. And even in my background, I still couldn't get on these rosters. So actually Speakify is to try and reduce those barriers to entry. And ultimately, I've also realized that, for most of the 16 years that I've been speaking, most speakers look like me, white men. And I just think it's just very strange that out of the, 8 billion people in the world, there's only white men in their sort of 40s that are mostly keynote speakers, or at least 95% of speakers. So actually with Speakify, we're trying to democratize the entire industry and reduce the barriers to entry, so that anybody, no matter what your background is, if you're a good speaker, if you have something to say, if you've got some sort of expertise or specialism or achieve something, whatever that is, there could be a client out there who'd want to book you. And that's what we want to do on Speakify.
I mean, like the concept sounds fantastic, and I think speaking is a great opportunity for many people that it does feel quite scary, but it's a really powerful way to get a message across and inspire a bunch of people at the same time. We spoke last week, and I got to hear a little bit about this last week, which was really cool. And when you were talking, something that I really liked was that you had mentioned, you had 3 kind of key moments in your life that you felt you were just really excited for whatever the future was going to be. And this being one of them. And I think the other 2 were when you were embarking on your professional football career, and then when you were transitioning as a speaker.
Yeah.
In terms of like, I can kind of, again, maybe going back to that like young boy in Belfast and the desire, ambition that he had, what was it about those moments that really kind of brought that feeling out in you, and how did it create that real desire to ensure success? Because I based on what you've spoken about, I have no doubt that you're going to make this venture successful, because that's just what you do. But how do you have the confidence to do so? And how did you have the confidence during those other 2 key moments?
So I don't think I had the confidence in either industry, if I'm really honest. I think that the football, I never felt like I was one of the better players for it. Even when I was, let's say when I was probably the best player was when I was maybe 9 to 11, before everybody kind of started growing and getting faster and bigger and stronger than me. That's probably my only time when I probably was, but never even realized I was. Once I got the 13, 14, and you have playing against men as a young prepubescent boy, I was like, I knew I wasn't one of the better players. As soon as I got the Spurs, I knew I wasn't. And then you go through a career and you always have better players. So I never felt that confidence, but I did, as a result of the goal that I set myself once I read the Tony Robbins book, that had such an appeal and was so desirable. I think it really drove me, because without it, it would have been very easy to give up. And I think that was probably most people just wanted to, be a professional footballer. And my goal wasn't to be just a professional footballer. My goal was, I actually want to have a long-term career as a professional footballer. Is a very big difference. Even just the specificity of your professional footballer, your 1-year contract, you don't do anything, you still achieved your goal. But I was like, not only do I want to have a long-term career, I want to leave professional football on my terms and injury-free. So that dictated and navigated my way through my career, made me decide some days I was ready to put my body on the line for the team, and other days I wasn't, because I knew if I played in this injury, more likely to do something that's probably going to knock me out of the game earlier. So being able to navigate that was a big part of it. And then when it came to the speaking, it was a bit like, I know I'm pretty terrible at this, but actually the more you practice, the more you do it, the more you get the sort of the belief. And also because I started using things like visualization, affirmations, goal setting, all of these things, which are almost like in the kind of the arsenal of a sports psychologist armory, then it helped me to be able to go, okay, I'm just going to apply the same things from football into speaking. And so that's why I do, right? Whenever I think about the whole Speakify opportunity, let's call it, the probability of me being an English Premier League footballer was 1%. And when I come out of that and haven't done it, I'm like, oh, wow, that was pretty cool. And then I try to do the speaking. I'm like, I'm never, ever, ever in a million years going to charge £20,000 for a 45-minute keynote. And is that my goal at the start, to then try and go and do that, to do what I was set out to do would be 0.00001% to get to that level. And I managed to achieve it multiple times. And now I've set out this goal where we basically want to build a global tech platform and almost become like the Irish Mark Zuckerberg. I'm like, the probability of this working out is probably way less and smaller than the other, because it's probably like 0.001, as opposed to all the others are just like, almost so ridiculously small probabilities. But again, the probability versus the potential in this is just enormous, because there's nothing else in the world currently happening that can do what we can do. The opportunity with it, it's a $1 trillion corporate events industry. So And these events are happening in every city, multiple times in every city, in every country, every single day of the year, around the world, being delivered in every language, being paid for in every currency. And it's still operating like it's in the 1980s. So we have a chance.
Well, and I think you've also already, your story is an example of the importance of it. Yes, there are some, there can be some cliches around certain, motivation and stuff, but you read a book from Tony Robbins and that completely changed your life.
Completely changed my life. Yeah.
Which is absolutely wild. And I really resonate with the lack of confidence side of things. I never really backed myself as the best. I was never the golden boy. I felt like I was always, and I was, the era of Tom Daley, right? And other incredible British divers. And so like I found that really difficult. But I also just committed. There's 100% commitment, but I found the confidence hard. But just like hearing how that shifted your life. And I just wonder as well, I mean, from you in speaking, I can imagine it must be, certainly to get to the level where you're charging £20,000 for one talk, you got to know you're pretty damn good, and they're going to know you're pretty damn good. So you've got to have a massive amount of value. So like, what does it sort of? It must have felt incredible to have had a sort of experience of your life being changed from Tony Robbins in a similar sort of format, and to then be able to deliver similar things to other people. I mean, what was, that's also a really cool kind of...
And do you know what's interesting as well is like that, whenever you've put in so much time and effort, that when you actually get to that stage, that's not the easy part, but that's like the work's done. You've got there and you're like, okay. It's like, I used to go out and play, and you're playing in front of, I don't know, 50,000, 55,000, 60, 75,000 people at Old Trafford. And at times you're a bit like, obviously 90% of the time, 95% of the time you're locked in on the game. But there's definitely a few minutes in the game and you're a bit like, did I leave the oven on at home? Or I'm not sure. It's like there's so much stuff because you've done all the work. You've done like 20 years of work to get to this point. And now whenever I'm going to do a keynote, and it's interesting, like I try to, hopefully you've got the gist that when I came out of professional football at 32, I'd never spoken in front of anybody. I was like, being Irish, I love having a bit of crack in the change room, but I wasn't like center of attention. Lads, come on around, listen to my. I was just in getting involved, but I wasn't like front and center. So when I was standing in front of an audience for the first time, I was so bad. Like, if I actually have footage from Aviva's gig when I booked me for the first time, and when they saw me speak, they must have been like, how do we get our money back? Because this kid is horrendous. He is so bad. He's stuttering, he's stammering, his cheeks are going rosy red, his legs are wobbling, he's sweating all of them. And that's my first ever speaking gig. But interestingly, because I knew the process of getting good at whatever, because I'd already used visualization as a 17-year-old kid whenever I was doing that every single day, because I then started applying affirmations and layering that in on top. And I remember now, like, and I say it to myself so many times every day at the start of my speaking career, was because I was so bad and I hated it. That's my reality on day one. But my affirmation was, I enjoy every possibility of speaking in front of an audience. So I'd say that I enjoy every possibility of speaking in front of an audience. But of course, I'd be saying this out loud. I enjoy every possibility of speaking in front of an audience. In the back of my mind, the little voice would go, no, you don't. And then I would go, I enjoy every possibility of speaking in front of an audience. And you go, no, you don't. Anyway, but that didn't happen until eventually, after like 6 months of me doing it, and then the voice got quieter, and I actually started to enjoy. And if you just put this into a timeline, from 2010, and just say by like 2011, the voice was getting quieter and I was getting louder and actually starting to enjoy it. All the way through, jumping out to 2026. I don't just enjoy it, I love it. It's like the best professional buzz I get. It's amazing. Wow. Crazy people pay me money to fly around the world, sometimes first class, to go and speak for 45 minutes, to talk about kicking a ball around with your mates. I'm like, I'm the luckiest guy in the world. Literally wake up every day and think, thank you, God, I'm the luckiest guy in the world. This is amazing. Wow. So, and that's just all part of the process, because
Yeah.
No one handed it to me, and over the last 15 years,
Yeah.
I've wanted to quit so many times because it's a really hard industry, and still my
Yeah.
profile is tiny. Nobody knows who I am. So to try and get booked around the world at that level, compared to trying to get booked with Stephen Bartlett or me or someone else or Daniel Priestley, it's really hard, but you still manage to keep going. And I actually am like, do you know what? I don't want to compete with these guys anymore. It's a bit like, in the gold rush in the Wild West in the 1800s. It wasn't people going to try and find the gold. It was the people selling the spades that were actually trying to get all the money. So I'm like, I don't want to compete with these guys anymore. I just want to build a platform. Off you go, boys. Well,
Yeah.
do your best.
But don't you think I think speaking is one of those things. There's a few things, like singing is one, speaking another. But there are some certain skills that I feel like a majority of people think, oh, well, you've either got it or you don't.
Yeah, I know.
And but like, why, people say, oh, I'm not a speaker. That's not.
Yeah.
But you show that right there,
And of course, then you start going into obviously my world. Love that when you talk about performance, when you talk about, is it Anders Anderson, like the sort of 10,000 hours rule? You talk about Malcolm Gladwell, Outliers. You talk about, like, I've got Matthew Syed wrote a brilliant book, Bounce, where he just took all these different, sort of pockets of performers around the world. And even whenever I was doing my sports science degree, my professor, can't remember his name now, but brilliant guy from MMU, from Manchester Metropolitan University, and his specialism was on genetics. And whenever people have this like assumption or stereotype about like all Kenyans or all Ethiopians are all brilliant runners, and he's like, no, literally there's a valley in Kenya and in Ethiopia where like the last 8 top 10 best runners in the world have come from. But if you live on this side of the valley or this side of the valley, you're a terrible runner. People who have this gene pool in this, and so it's that trying to say that whoever gets to whatever level they get to, none of this is by accident. It just none of this happens by accident. You just know it's purposeful practice. It's consistent reps. It's time after time. It's dealing with all of the shit that comes with how do you get your body to go again? How do you get your mind to go again? How do you get the opportunities to be able to do the things you want to do? And it's really, really challenging. But people like you guys and me seem to find a way because we're either really, really stubborn or we're just really, really terrible at giving up. I don't know which it is. Actually, tell me.
I love both options, being stubborn and being terrible at giving up. I do like that because it's so true. I think, and some of the things that you said just resonated so much. Like the whole kind of being in a certain environment. I remember the feeling in Paris, first time back in like a really busy, arena with plenty of people in the stands, and I went out on the poolside before the competition started, and I just walked around on the poolside, looked up in the stands, like super calm. That 10 years ago, couldn't have done that. No way. I'd have been so scared.
Yeah.
And it's that feeling that really builds, and that feeling of confidence and just calmness in pressure situations to be able to make good decisions.
You know what?
That
is like you probably almost summed up having you there, just this feeling. That's because if you really boil it down, it's just feelings.
Yeah.
The feeling before, like we played in a playoff. Actually, I have no memorabilia, no football memorabilia, and I had like 5 black bags of shirts of Gerrard and Terry and Italy and Germany. I give them all away about 10 years ago. Everything you could possibly have. I don't have one thing left, and it's this photograph up here from whenever I played in the 2002, and it's literally because I forgot to get rid of it. It's the only reason why it's still up. But is 75,000 people in the playoff final, and it was it's that richest game in the world, the end of the season championship, whoever team gets the Premier League money. And I remember in the warm-up, similar to that warm-up in 2002, was similar to my debut warm-up away at Villa Park, where I literally got out on the pitch and I was just like sprinting. My heart was racing. I'm like, I can't control. There's just, that just pumped. You're so pumped. So the whole debut thing was so tough. But when I got out for the warm-up in that game, like indoor arena, I'd never played in 75,000 indoor arena because we closed the roof, the Millennium Stadium. Incredible atmosphere. The warm-up, I was pretty terrified in the adrenaline. But just before kickoff, I was like, wow. Wow. And even after and again, we lost on penalties. Everyone else had grown men crying around me. I remember walking around the stadium after the game. Birmingham all stayed, Norwich fans all stayed. Everybody was just still celebrating because we did so well, but still lost on penalties. And I remember walking around going, this is it. This is the reason. This is why you put in that effort, and that's why you did this. And it's the same why I'll go and do a speaking gig somewhere, and suddenly you're just about to go on, and you're like, all these people in the audience are here just to listen to you. And that's that feeling. It's just a feeling. It's not money. It's not awards. It's not accolades. Not no one telling you that you're good. It's just that feeling. And interestingly, because if I go back to the visualization stuff I did when I was 17, 18, 19, that allowed me, I think, the one visualization scenario that I did, which was getting the ball on the left-hand side, cutting in, curling the top corner. That's the goal that I scored most of in my career. One of the things I did when I was visualizing, don't know if you guys ever did this, if you ever did any visualizing, but I had this second finger and thumb together and squeeze, which was like an anchor. So this feeling of me have run through me sort of peak performance, coming in, scoring, top corner. So I'm running through that peak performance visualization. And at the same time as imagining it and watching in my mind, I had a physical visualization manifestation, which is called the anchor. And that's the same thing I use before I go on stage now every time. So that is recreation.
Freddie, do you remember, was it Rhiannon talking about her like rubbing her fingers together exactly the same way? So Rhiannon Ifland, you know, 9 times in a row Red Bull World Series cliff diver winner, unbelievable dominance over the last decade, and she spoke about the exact same thing of, she like rubs her fingers together and it just brings that feeling of calm, and that's amazing. That's exactly what you're talking about.
I've got goosebumps down the back of my head. Like I've literally got tingles on my neck because as soon as I do that, think of that every single time. I've either visualized it when I'm sitting on my bed in North London for those 6 years when I was at Spurs, then I did it at Norwich, but also before every game. When some people probably don't have many games, but in the change room, you have such a variety of personalities. Some people are bouncing off the walls. Some people are in having whatever, a Red Bull or coffee before the game, whatever is happening. And I'd be just like that, head down, running through the move of my mind with my hand like this, with my hand closed so people couldn't see me doing it. Because again, didn't have the balls to tell anyone that I was doing it. I'm literally like that. And because I'm pressing, that's just anchoring, it just recreates, just brings that state straight to the top of my mind. So that's why I just got that feeling in the back of my neck, just as I'm thinking about, because then it's me moments before going out to play a game. It's kind of, going into the kind of the Coliseum under the Lions or whatever.
Wow.
The mind is everything, isn't it?
Yeah.
The mind, it's everything.
Yeah. Even more so for me when you're 5'6", because I used to look in the mirror and think I looked like Brad Pitt. I'm like, I used to say to the boys, I can't wait until tomorrow. They're like, why? I just get better looking every day. And they're like, you look like Noel Edmonds. Don't think you're good looking.
Noel Edmonds. that is terrible.
They thought I had dyslexia of the eyes. I'm like, in my mind, I'm like looking like David Gandhi, like a male model. I'm like, you look like Frodo Baggins. What are you talking? You got hair, you're 4 foot nothing. Like, go away. I'm like, yeah, honestly, guys, it was just all in here, It's not so.
I love
That's so funny. I mean, I feel like we're just really starting to hit the decks now. I regretfully have to bring the conversation short, and I'd love to potentially revisit and hear the development of Speakify in a few years' time. But just to close,
I'll make sure that whenever I'm having lunch with Mark Zuckerberg that you can come along, for that one. Okay.
Yes, please. I'm available.
You're available.
I'll visualize it starting now.
Just to bring this main episode to a close, to create the title for the episodes, what we ask every single guest is, if your career or life to this point was a movie, what would the title be?
Mindset. Just mindset. One word. Yeah.
Very, very succinct and clear.
Damn.
I think it's I can't think of anything else that possibly would do it justice. And obviously, I'd like Brad Pitt to play me in the movie.
Naturally.
Or Jimmy Dornan, because he's pretty cool too.
Wow. Well, I mean, I suppose for a guy who's written a couple of books, it makes sense as well to have a very, very clear and solid title.
Yeah.
Yeah. Paul, thank you so much, man. I think there's some amazing takeaways for, I mean, athletes, but anyone looking to achieve anything listening to this. Some incredible takeaways and a lot of inspiration. And I'm really excited for Speakify and how that develops. So thank you for sharing everything. Thank you for your time. It's been a real pleasure.
No, pleasure. And I think that the one thing that I would say, and you just touched on it there, Freddie, is that my wife, who, she was a trained actress, so she went to Guildford School of Acting, which is really kind of high level. Lots of her peers and colleagues have gone on to be like the leads in Les Mis in the West End and Bridgerton and things like that. And the fact that she's my co-founder in what we're doing and pretty much the engine room of the whole business, and the fact that she more or less should be the one who gets all the praise for Speakify, because if it was down to me, what men are like, it wouldn't go anywhere. So she's just driving everything. And that just goes back to what you said. This is not a sport thing. And this is not even a whatever you want to achieve. This is just there is so much latent potential in people, because, and probably that's what comes back to my entire speaking, any event I do. What we think we're capable of and what we're actually capable of is night and day. So that's why I try and get out of my own way so many times. So when I think about my goal when I was a 16-year-old kid was to be a Premier League footballer, I was like, probably not going to do this. But it was me stopping myself. Me as a speaker at 32, 16 years ago, I'm like, want to earn $20,000 to get paid to speak around the world. Probably not going to do it. Get out of your way, Paul. And now, my goal is literally, and I said on here because I've said it so many times before, I literally want to open up, like the Financial Times or the New York Times or something like that. And I wanted to read Irish tech billionaire Paul McVeigh. Not because I want £1 billion in my bank account. I don't. That's not it. It's just to go, why not? To try and get to being a Premier League footballer, the odds against that were so ridiculously high. Me, where I started, from my kind of ground zero to be a speaker, the odds were so ridiculously high that I was never ever going to do it. So why not?
And you fucking say it.
And in my head,
I love that.
In my head, that's what it is. That's what we're going for. Now, it might not go anywhere. It might be a complete disaster. Nobody might use it. But that's okay, because this is the plan and this is the goal. And we'll see, and we'll iterate, and we'll see where we go from there.
Wow. Amazing. That's it. We're too afraid to... And me, I'm also, culpable of this, but actually just fucking saying it, just laying it out.
Right there.
Yeah. All right. Well, that is where we are going to wrap up the main episode. So thanks again to Paul McVeigh. But he is going to hang around just for a little bit more for our bonus section, one more dive. So if you're not there yet, the link is in the show notes. And if you've enjoyed this episode, like, subscribe, follow wherever you're listening and watching. Thank you so much. We'll catch you in the next one.